Welcome to Storm Tracker, your eye on the storm of your Carolina Hurricanes, and your home for the best insight and analysis to keep you totally informed on what's happening with the Canes. Whether it's the latest news on the ice or off the ice, we've got you covered. Now let's begin. Here's your host, Tom Ray.
Well, lots of excitement in the Carolina Hurricanes camp these days. The Canes have been on a bit of a roll. After an extended period of 500 hockey, the Canes have got hot. They've got 9 of a possible 10 points in their last 5 games, and they're playing extremely well. But the big news happened off the ice. Last weekend, the Hurricanes made a major move, acquiring superstar Mikko Rantanen from the Colorado Avalanche and Taylor Hall from the Chicago Blackhawks. And in to talk about the trade, what we think about it, some of the stats around these guys, and a deep dive into what it might mean to the Canes. Pleased to be joined by Aaron Manning and Katie Berlin. Ladies.
Hi there.
Hey.
Okay, so looking at the Hurricanes, as I mentioned, they've been on a bit of a roll. And you know, we started the season, a lot of folks were thinking this was a transition year for the Canes, and I think they may be taking a step back now and say, maybe not, after the big move on the weekend. But the Canes have really started to turn it up. And they moved into second place in the Eastern Conference, and they're sitting quite strong, as you know. And they're trailing only the red-hot Washington Capitals, who've been playing outstanding hockey this year. But as we look at the big move on the weekend, which really sent the sports world and the hockey world abuzz, a shocking trade that brought the Canes Mikko Rantanen and Taylor Hall, and sent out, among other players, the key players from the Canes, Marty Necas, and of course, Jack Drury. So, what do we think of this? Why don't we kick it off? Katie, what do you think about the trade? Being an Avs fan, you've got lots to say, I'm sure.
I was so excited when I saw this went down. Obviously, it's a win-win for me, right? The players don't leave my teams. They just happen to swap teams. And so Rantanen is still my player. Necas is still my player. Drury's still my player. I couldn't be happier. In fact, the notion of this trade actually had occurred to me back last summer when I was bored, and I was thinking about, well, Rantanen needs an extension, and there's a little bit of contention over Necas and what his RFA deal is going to look like. Well, why don't the Avs and the Canes just swap players? And the Canes have the cap room and want the kind of player that Rantanen is, and Necas' skill set fits in perfectly with the way that the Avalanche play hockey, and wrote a whole big post on X about it, and it is like a dream come true. It has been a fun weekend for me, for sure, without a doubt.
Well, I think some of us were a little bit more than surprised. The Canes have been rumored to be in discussions on a number of different opportunities, most significantly, of course, with the Vancouver Canucks. And a lot of folks thought the announcement, if anything, that was coming would be for JT Miller or possibly even Elias Pettersson. But when we heard it was Mikko Rantanen, that was quite shocking. And again, one of the top players in the league right now, and he brings a lot to the table. What can you tell us about Rantanen as a player?
Well, the most obvious thing, of course, is that he is a big player. He's 6'4", and you can tell that when he is on the ice. He is noticeable, and he uses that size to his advantage. He definitely gets in there and gets positioning and that sort of thing. But for being such a big guy, he has amazing skill that can be quite subtle, and his skills are varied. So he is a really, really good playmaker and passer. He can sauce the puck into the tightest of spaces and get it to a teammate. But he also has a really good shot that is a fast shot. He can get it on and off his stick in the blink of an eye. And that's part of why he is such a good goal scorer, because with that particular shot speed, a lot of times it just doesn't give defenses and goalies enough time to react before it's in the back of the net. So those pieces are particularly obvious. Rantanen is also good along the boards in the offensive zone. It uses that frame to box out, to get pucks, to get it to his line mates. And because he takes up space and draws other players to him, it opens up the ice for his line mates and any D that are guarding the blue line. So I definitely think that his particular offensive game will fit very, very well with the Hurricanes on the ice. The one thing he is going to have to get used to is, let's just say Rantanen is not typically described as a 200-foot player. His enthusiasm for getting back to the defensive zone and helping out there perhaps is not as developed as you would expect for somebody who plays in a Rod Brindamore system. So he will have to get used to that aspect of the game, but he's a smart player. He is capable of lots of good hard work. And I think that he is up to the task for sure. And then in the locker room, that's also what a lot of people don't know about Rantanen, is the fact that the guy is hilarious. He has a really goofy sense of humor. He's outgoing. He brings sunshine with him. He jokes around. He's, when we think of our Finnish players on the Canes and the kind of personality they have, that is not Rantanen at all. He is very bubbly, and can't wait to see some of the clips that come out of there pretty soon, because I think he's going to get in with Jarvie and some of that ilk and really start to yuck it up together off of the ice, not just on the ice.
Well, it's interesting. Eric Tulsky was saying as well in some of his pressers that he felt that the Canes players would be a nice match for Mikko. And again, virtually anybody that's come to the Canes has fit in quite nicely, has enjoyed the team, has enjoyed the coach. So again, that's part of the discussion that will take place throughout this later in the season and into the early summer as the Canes try to put the deal together to lock Mikko up. And that's an interesting part of this deal, is that, of course, Mikko is going to be a unrestricted free agent this year. So a lot of folks are sitting back and saying, is this going to be another situation like Jake Gensel, or are the Canes going to be able to put a deal together and lock Mikko Rantanen up for long term? And of course, we know that the opportunity the Canes have is a unique one, because they can sign him for 8 years, and there isn't another team in the league that could. So that's a real advantage, I think, for the Hurricanes. And the other thing we've seen with Mikko that's interesting is that through his discussions and negotiations with the Avalanche, he was willing to take a little bit less in terms of dollars because he wanted to be a part of that team for the longer term. And of course, with his very close friend, Nathan McKinnon. So I think if he can get hooked up with some of these younger guys, as you mentioned, Katie, and certainly with his friend Sebastian Aho, that could be a very good harbinger of what might happen in terms of a contract extension for Mikko. I wanted to read a little bit about Mikko in a couple of areas. One of them is the Hockey Forecaster scouting report on him. And they said few players have his combination of size, skill, and speed. So we've seen that for sure. He has an excellent hockey IQ and can make plays at high speed. And that's something that differentiates, I think, the stars in the game over others for sure. They can make plays at very high speed. His one-time shot makes him a major threat on the power play, and he uses his size well to protect the puck. So things that we're looking for, right? They're looking for, as you mentioned, Katie, that one-time shot, that ability to get it off. And even in his first game the other day, I don't know if you saw this, but certainly he was getting some shots off. He was getting in position. He was finding those open areas. And I mean, we saw some of the same situation, of course, with Martin Necas playing with the Avalanche. He was wiring the puck, as I'm sure you were excited to see that too, Katie. In any case, again, he's an elite skill. He can do a lot of things well. If we take a look at the NHL Edge information on Mikko as well, top skating speed this year, he's in the 84th percentile. So he's, again, a guy that he's up around 22 miles an hour, so he can move pretty quickly, that's for sure. Speed burst, he's at 61, but skating distance, he's in the 97th percentile. Top shot speed, 90th percentile. These are big numbers. Like, he's near the top. Shots on goal, 95th percentile. Okay, so he's a guy that gets a lot of shots on goal, as we know. Shooting percentage at 86, in the 86th percentile. So again, these numbers are all outstanding. Goals, he's at 98 because he's among the top goal scorers in the league with 25. So again, the other thing that's interesting, he's in the 93rd percentile for offensive zone time. So clearly he's a guy that can get up and they can hold the puck. And that's back to, I think, the discussion on his ability to do good board work. He's very strong on the boards, right? And he's a guy that can bring that. Aaron, what are you thinking about with Mikko Rantanen?
Well, it's just like Katie was saying, it was one of those things that you just, you really didn't expect it, other than, this fun little scenario. Oh, what if the Canes could get somebody like that, And I mean, I like to look at it this way. The Canes have been rumored to be in on a lot of top players that they haven't actually gotten. We have the Timo Meier discussion. We had the discussion, Jack Eichel. Yeah, Eichel, yeah. There's Matthew Tkachuk. Okay, that was the one I was trying to think of. I was like, who was the other one? Matthew Tkachuk was the big, and the thing about both the discussions of Tkachuk and Eichel and all these guys is that, and Timo Meier even in particular, all of those guys would have taken a bigger package, and the at the time, maybe not now, but at the time, the big piece in addition to Necas that would have been included was Seth Jarvis. And I can't really imagine this team without Seth Jarvis. So to me, the fact that those deals didn't work out and this is the one that did, it's not just a great fit from the perspective of adding Mikko Rantanen to a team where one of his best friends from Finland actually plays, but we didn't have to lose Seth Jarvis in one of these deals, because I think that and everyone said at the time, when I remember the discussions about Meier, it was, Jarvis was still just a prospect then. We don't really know what we have here. I mean, he had just started playing. I think he was his rookie season. He's only played this many games. I can't even imagine if Jarvis was playing in New Jersey right now. I can't imagine how miserable that would be for Canes fans. So to get Rantanen without losing players that are so sewn into the identity of the Canes. And I mean, as much as I love Martin Necas, I think this is good for him. And I think it's good for Jack Drury too. It's wonderful for them, because Necas has not been able to be utilized the way he should be in the NHL as long as he's been playing for the Carolina Hurricanes. He's so fast, and he just, you saw that when, I think, Katie, we were both talking about this a little bit, the game on Sunday. His speed and matched with Nathan MacKinnon is just breathtaking. It's incredible to watch what they can do, and they're just getting started. So sometimes I think the guys need to go to a system that's going to fit them better. And I'm hoping with all these stats that you've given us, Tom, that this is what we're going to see from Rantanen too, that as great as he has been, maybe he can get even to a higher level. Maybe we're going to see him in that top 3, top 4 discussion in the NHL in some of these categories. And that would be great too. So.
And I'd like to add that this is a real big opportunity for Rantanen, because for his entire career in Colorado, he has played either second fiddle to MacKinnon, or then when Makar came along a couple years later, then he was the number 3 superstar. And if he had stayed in Colorado, he would have continued to be the number 3 superstar. MacKinnon was the top forward, and Makar is just Makar, special unicorn type of player that he is. And so it's not just from a cap point of view, but just from the Avs wanted to be more balanced. And when it was very clear that they weren't going to come to a salary agreement that allowed them to remain competitive from the top of their lineup to the bottom of their lineup, they decided to deal him. And I think they did. A lot of people were like, oh, he was surprised. Yeah, he was surprised. But you know what? they could have traded him to a team that had no playoff perspective whatsoever for some of their young talent and probably gotten a bigger package out of it, would have gotten more players or more draft picks or something like that. But they said, we're competitive. We need to find somebody who matches what we're going to need from Rantanen being gone. And we want Rantanen to have an opportunity to still shine, to still have an impact in the postseason. And so him coming to the Hurricanes puts him in a really, really nice spot because, number one, he can be the guy. He is not going to be playing second fiddle or third fiddle or whatever to other stars. It is the guy. He is the guy. He is the superstar. I mean, we love Aho, we love Jarvi, we love our players, but he is on a different level. And I'm really excited to see how he embraces that particular role on the ice and in the locker room and helps to push this team hopefully further than they have managed to get in this particular iteration of the franchise and the history of the group. So I'm really, really excited to see how that goes because I think Mikko has it in him. But again, he was in a position where he didn't have that opportunity. Now he has that opportunity. He has players that complement his skill set really well. It's go time for him. I really, really hope he seizes this and makes the most out of it.
Well, you mentioned something interesting. Mikko Rantanen's performance in the playoffs is off the charts. He's got 100 points in 81 games. It's insane. And I think, again, for the Hurricanes, a big body, a guy that can definitely drive, the offense and the play in playoffs is going to be a huge asset for them. And again, it's back to the same challenge the Canes have had for the last 6 years, getting in the playoffs and then kind of running out of gas. And size is a key element of this. And I think Mikko brings that for sure. And the other thing I wanted to ask prior to moving on to the next players, how do we think this is going to affect Sebastian Aho?
Well, we just said in our last meeting together that what we needed to see for Aho was a true center winger duo, that he had never had that kind of he's gotten close with Jarvis, but the problem there is that right now Jarvis is being used on Stahl's line to help Jordan Stahl's line get some offense. So, you can't form a duo if your primary winger is constantly being moved away from you. So it's a little challenging. So if this turns into that kind of connection, that kind of chemistry where you have two players who are just reading each other so well and feeding off each other so well, that is definitely going to change things for the Canes, both in the regular season and the postseason. And I think back to, not only were there lots of pundits that were saying that the Canes would miss the playoffs this season, which is such a funny thing to think about, but also Sarah Sivian, who used to be the Canes reporter for The Athletic, she always said that what the Canes lacked was what, in her terms, oomph per 60, meaning, that superstar talent. Well, I don't think you can get much more oomph than Mikko Rantanen. So this is exciting. This is a new era for the Canes. I think that a lot of us, the words that kept being used Friday night was, this is a franchise-altering deal. It is. And it's going to take a while for it to settle in and for us to see everything that comes of it. But this is not your typical trade. So it's exciting.
Well, the other thing, and I think you're hitting something which is really important, it's going to take a while for these players to, kind of become accustomed to their teammates, to their new location, to, the style of play, their coach. I mean, this is all new, right? And I think that as fans, we have to, Martin Necas and Jack Drury off to a quick start with the Avalanche, but we just need to be patient. We need, and a lot of folks have talked about this on the Canes broadcast, and other folks have talked about, look, you have to understand that this is a major, major shift. Here's a player, particularly in the case of Mikko, who's been with the same team right from the get-go. He's very close to all of those players, and certainly the key ones. And all of a sudden, he's in a different locker room with a bunch of people that, are new and he hasn't played with previously. So, we just need to be patient. Let these guys find their way. Rod's got to find the combinations. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but he's got to find the combinations that are going to work. We are very sure, I think we believe strongly that, of course, Mikko will team up with Sebastian Aho. And one of the interesting things about that too, and I'd like to get your thoughts on this, of course, Seabass, or Sebastian as he's called sometimes, he was most successful with Teuvo Teravainen for a long time. Mm-hmm. Okay, so the two cherubs, as they called it, the two Finns, missing Teuvo this year, I think that's affected at different times. That's affected Sebastian as well. Now he's got a countryman. He's got a friend of his that is, again, on a different level of play. And so he's in a situation where he can start to, maybe he can move forward from the fact that he lost one of his best friends and a great hockey player in Teuvo. And I think that's another part of this story that's going to play out over time. I think it's going to work out very well for the Hurricanes. So again, a lot of positive things, a lot of different side stories here for sure with the addition of Mikko. And the Canes had to add somebody like that. We've talked a lot about the fact that you see these teams out there with the, McDavid and Draisaitl, or, some of the other combinations. It was McKinnon and Rantanen, and thankfully that's not there anymore. So, yeah, I think a lot of different side stories are going to play out, so it'll be interesting to see how it goes. What are our expectations for the rest of the year for Mikko? What do we hope he's going to do for us?
Well, I definitely think that we need to have reasonable expectations. He was used to playing with McKinnon, who is one type of center, and now he's with Aho, who's another type of center. But I think his production will be fine. I think he'll have really good production. I think he will definitely come close to 100 points, if not get it again. Part of it just depends on how quickly that chemistry forms. A lot of that will have to do with Rantanen himself and how he plays and adjusts to the new system. Part of it's also going to be with Aho and whoever is on the wing, which right now is Jackson Blake, and how they adjust their game to playing with Mikko. They cannot be playing the exact same game with him on the wing as they played with other guys on their wing. This is not Roslovic. This is not Svech. This is not Jarvis. He is his own type of player, and they need to learn how to read him, and they need to elevate their games too. Going back to what we're talking about with Aho needs to find another gear. If you're going to center a player like Rantanen, you need to be playing yourself in a higher gear. And so not only will I think Rantanen's production be good, but anything that perhaps he doesn't get because he's not playing with McKinnon anymore will be made up for by the added production that will come from his line mates that they wouldn't have otherwise enjoyed if the trade hadn't happened in the first place. So overall, I think it'll be great. I just want to make sure that whoever he ends up playing with, they get as much time and as much runway to create chemistry together so that they are red hot and ready to go once the playoffs roll around.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I think I agree. And again, I think, he's going to produce. He is. He's just that kind of a player. Mm-hmm. And the question is, who are going to be the other folks with him and how fast can they ramp this up? Now, the other player in this deal was an interesting one. And apparently turns out that Eric Tulsky really wanted this player. He had been talking to Chicago for a while. He felt like Taylor Hall would be a great addition to the Hurricanes for the playoff run this year. And the magic of Tulsky, once again, in putting this deal together, finding a way to get Hall and at the same time put together the deal that would allow him to get Mikko Rantanen and make it work within the cap constraints that Eric has had to struggle with this entire year. Taylor Hall's an interesting one. Again, Hall is a big player. He's a guy that comes in. He's a stocky player. He's extremely strong. All of a sudden now you're seeing quite a change to the Hurricanes. I mean, we saw Marty Necas, who is a tall player, but he's not a bulky player, doesn't play a heavy game. Jack Drury, of course, again, a slight player too. And you're bringing in two guys that are going to bring some real size and going to change the landscape of the Hurricanes in terms of that. Here's the scouting report from Hockey Forecaster on Taylor Hall, which I think is interesting. He still has the speed, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that helped him be the number one overall pick in 2010. So he was a number one overall pick. We know that. That's incredible. An explosive skater and a superb playmaker. So this is interesting, and we'll talk about how that's going to work with his new line mates. He makes others around him better and opposing defenseman miserable. I love that. He's battled injuries and inconsistency throughout his career, but he's still one of the most dangerous wingers when healthy in the NHL. So this is quite a story for him. And we look at, just as I'm talking about this, we look at the NHL Edge stuff. And one of the things that really jumped out at me, and certainly when he was healthy a couple of years ago with the Bruins, it was very strong, is his skating, his top speed, his ability to get speed bursts and so on. So this guy can really motor, and he can get down low, and he looks sometimes a little bit like William Carrier. He can really go in and get things done, and he's a heavy shooter as well. So what are we thinking about Taylor Hall?
Well, I think that one of the things that we talked about was that the Canes, they definitely still needed another top six winger. And I think that based on how things went in the first game, it looks like there's a good chance that Hall will be used in that role, at least to start. We'll see how it goes. But I know that the comment from the JFresh hockey account was that he's an underrated forechecker. And I found myself watching that very much in the game against the Islanders because his forechecking is really very excellent. So that's going to endear him to Rod Brind'Amour, no question, because we all know that is, one of the key elements of the Jordan Staal line, the line that they really want every line to kind of have that identity in terms of being able to just get in on the puck and forecheck hard and work the cycle and all that. So I think that Taylor Hall is going to be a tremendous asset to the team, and if he can stick on that second line, which would be great because both Svechnikov and Kotkaniemi could use to have somebody that's going to help them elevate their game in those areas, and Svech in particular being a power forward type, having a playmaker. You said that Hall had a lot of good playmaking ability. That's going to be a critical element for that line too. So it's going to be interesting to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, I'm really excited to see what can happen with Hall. Exactly what Aaron said. He seems like he's more of a prototypical Rod Brind'Amour style player, and and we need to get Svech going. I think we've talked about it on multiple different occasions that he hasn't quite lived up to the billing and hasn't produced the way that we want him to. And so the combined presence of Hall on his line to help get him the puck and give him those scoring opportunities, as well as having Rantanen on the team who can perhaps tutor him a little bit more in the finer points of being a skilled power forward, that you don't have to be either or, you can be both, and will be huge for Svech in the coming weeks. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how that impacts his game. And Hall also seems like somebody who really wants to be a Hurricane. He's excited for this opportunity. He's mentioned in interviews before that he's kind of hoping that this might be his last stop, that with kind of giving that wink and nod towards I want to do well, I want to prove myself so that I can get a contract that I'm happy with to get me to what could potentially be his retirement years. And so he comes in motivated, he comes in with a good skill set, and definitely the that heaviness. Last postseason, Brind'Amour played with the lines because he felt like lines were getting pushed over, were too small, getting pushed off the puck too much, losing those battles in the corner. While with Rantanen, you're not going to be losing those battles. That gives you size on that first line. But then that second line, they're all big, strong dudes on that second line. And they really, really have the opportunity to put together something that has the physicality of Staal's line, but more of a scoring upside similar to, but not equal to, the first line. And so if they can find that perfect blend of physicality and a scoring touch and be that extra threat, teams are really going to have to consider how they play the Hurricanes. It's not going to be a matter of if you shut down Aho and Rantanen, then you're good to go. You've taken care of the entire Carolina Hurricanes offense. You have these other big boys you have to worry about as well. And so I really like the scoring threat that he brings to help create a proper two-line attack system on offense.
Yeah, a couple of comments. I agree. And I'm really excited about the potential of this being a heavy line. I mean, historically, the Canes have been really relying on Stahl's line to do a lot of that heavy lifting, as we know, and a lot of other smaller players. And this is changing the landscape of the Hurricanes big time. And you think about teams like the Florida Panthers and some of the other teams that they're going to face that are really heavy. They play a heavy game. All of a sudden now, they're not going to just face one line. They're going to face more. And I think that's going to be critical for them. A couple things on Hall. He's another left shot right winger. He can play both sides, but he seems to do best on the right side. So he's very similar to Mikko Rantanen in that regard. The other thing is Hall has always had pretty darn good power play numbers as well. So he's a guy that and I thought he looked good in his first goal on that second power play unit. He seemed to look like he was out there making some things happen. Eric Tulsky really wanted him. That means a lot. Yes. Because, Eric has handpicked the guys that have the Canes in second overall in the East. That's an amazing story after losing so many key players in free agency. It's one that we'll keep talking about because I think what's happening, and we're seeing it on X for sure, a lot of folks have finally realized that Eric Tulsky is an incredible general manager. And he's making a lot of great moves. And the fact that he wanted Taylor Hall this much and he felt Hall was an ideal fit for the Rod Brindamore, style of play tells me a lot. And that gives me a good feeling that Taylor, as you say, he's motivated like crazy. He's going to come in and he's going to want to show, he was kind of, again, in Chicago, he started off fine, but he kind of lost his way. And, with a team that's losing a lot, I guess it's not, it's not unexpected. But now he comes to a fresh start. And again, this guy was MVP one year. He was a Hart Trophy winner. I mean, he's got the pedigree for sure. And he's not so old that he can't come in and make a difference. I think he's got a lot of runway left. We talked a little bit about the fact that he struggled through a lot of injuries. He's missed a lot of games over the last 6 or 7 years. So his body has not been beat up as badly, I guess, as some of the other players in the league. That's probably a good thing. And if he's healthy, now last year's injury was a tough one. It was a torn ACL. We know what that's like. So it took him a long time to come back from that. But he's, from my, eyeballs watching him in some of the highlights of the Hawks, and certainly in the first game with the Canes, he looks like he's skating just fine. So again, excited to have Taylor on board. Now we look at this. We got to think about the lineup. And how do we think it's going to come together? Aaron, what do you got?
Well, I did see the practice lines today, and we're going to see pretty much similar to what we saw in the third period, I think, against the Islanders. It's going to be, at least if the practice lines hold for the game, because you always have to say that because you never know. But if the practice lines are the same as the game lines for tomorrow night's game, they had Rantanen, Aho, and Jackson Blake on the top line.
Yep. Okay.
I don't have them in the right order. I'm sorry. And then they had Svech, Kotkaniemi, and Hall on the second. The same Stahl line: Martinick, Stahl, and Jarvis. And then now the third line today at practice, it was Riley Stillman with Juha Jaska and.
Because Roslovic was ill.
Because Jack Roslovic is out sick. So the fourth line may be a little bit in flux because and with Eric Robinson, and Juha Jaska. So the fourth line may be a little bit in flux because we don't know if Roslovic's illness is the kind of thing that he's not going to be able to play through, or if he's going to be all right. Now, because it's one game, I don't see them making a call up. If I have a feeling if they have to, they'll go 11-7. Now that would be really interesting, given that we have two new players in the lineup, and going 11-7 would mean adding a third that hasn't played a game yet with the Canes. So that could be an interesting scenario, something to keep an eye on. And of course by the time this comes out, we'll already know. But for us, it's kind of funny. I think we talked about this a little bit. I'm not sold, and neither is Katie, I think, on whether Jackson Blake should remain on that top line. I think eventually you really want to have Seth Jarvis back up there. Jarvis can play on his off wing with no problem. He can play on the left. He has played on the left in games with the Canes. So I don't really see that you're going to want one of your top offensive producers on the team, because he really is, playing on the third line indefinitely. But we all know the situation with Will Carrier's injury and not having an obvious fit to slot back in there. They're going to be juggling some pieces around and trying to decide what the best thing to do is, I'm sure, once they get home, going forward.
And I don't know if it's something just because of Blake being currently up there, but the practice lines had Rantanen listed at the left wing. And while he is a left shot, his entire career he has played on the right wing. He likes to play on his offside because he likes to open up for that shot from the face-off circle into the goal. And so I don't know if putting him on the left wing at the moment is because of Blake or because they just haven't quite figured out how they're going to use somebody who's a left shot on the right wing or what it is. But I would also expect that whatever the final lineup is that they go with coming out of the Four Nations. I would like to think that whatever they envision for the playoffs to be their lines will be what they go with starting after the Four Nations face off. I hope that they do have Rantanen back over there. Now, it could just be that he's listed at left wing at the moment, and then when we watch him play, he'll be on the right side of the ice most of the time. Yeah. That's to be determined, but that is where you want to find him.
Yeah, I wouldn't read anything into that. He'll be playing the right wing. I don't think there's any question. He's a right winger, and that's what he does. And Blake was fine on the left side. I mean, he was fine. But I think the bigger question is, and that's I think that's a good segue into, we think about what this lineup might look like coming out of the Four Nations. Okay, so you've got, thinking that we want to keep Kotkaniemi with Svechnikov and Taylor Hall. I think that would be kind of fun if we can do that. We know we're going to have Aho and Rantanen as a combination. Who should move up there? That's going to be a question we can talk about. And then, of course, if it's Jarvis, then that's fine. Who's going to replace Seth on that line with Martinook and Jordan Staal? So kind of interesting questions. If Tyson Jost is healthy, of course, he'll come back and take that fourth line center spot, which that's fine for now. And we'll talk a little bit about some thoughts beyond that. But let's say it's Jost, and you've got, of course, Eric Robinson, who will be just fine on that fourth line. He's a great left winger for that line. And you've got Jack Roslovic. Now, is it possible Roslovic moves up?
Besides Stahl?
Yeah, or anywhere. Can he move? Is it possible he moves up off the fourth line?
I think that is possible because I know we haven't had a lot of sample sizes of seeing him on that fourth line, but he hasn't been terribly effective there, and you wouldn't really expect him to be. It's not his role. He doesn't usually. I think in Columbus there were times when he played at 4C, usually for the same kind of reasons that he's taken that kind of spot here occasionally. I think he can handle that okay. It's not his best spot, but as a fourth line winger, I really don't think you're getting the best out of Jack Roslovic. Mm-hmm. So I would think that they could try him next to Jordan Staal if they wanted to get. If the idea of having Jarvis there is to have a little bit more scoring touch, why not? Roslovic is the leading goal scorer on the team right now. I mean, a second only to Rantanen, who has not yet scored for the Canes. No, you're right. He's the leading. Sure. He's leading goal scorer of the people who have been here from day one. So they could try that. I don't know if Roslovic's defensive lapses would drive that line crazy or if that would just be absorbed in what Jordan Staal is capable of doing. So, that would be something that they could try. What do you think, Katie?
Katie, what do you think?
That's a possibility, or I could see, and this. You'd have to see how it affects things defensively again. They could try to put him on the second line, and Svech has played with Stahl before, and so that could work. If you're wanting to start Svech, though, and make him into an offensive threat more so than he has been this season, probably not the move the Canes want to make, but you never know. The other possibility would be trying somebody like Hall there and see how he works with them if you want to move Roslovic up. But right now, Roslovic really is kind of an interesting puzzle piece on the where does he fit, because there's not a clear-cut role for him right now on this team.
Right.
Well, and that takes us into the next part of this, which is the Canes are going to have to make some more moves. We know that as we kind of head out through the through the Four Nations and then head towards the trade deadline. The Canes have got a bit of a hole at center ice now. They've got to resolve that. I don't see them going into the playoffs with Tyson Jost as their fourth line centerman. And I think Jack Roslovic is in a position where we've talked a lot about this. He at the start of the year was a revelation. I mean, incredible. But he basically is playing himself off the team. There really isn't a spot for him. He's not a fourth liner, and he won't be a fourth liner going into the playoffs. I cannot imagine that to be the case. They need a much heavier, more aggressive fourth line if they're going to compete. So he's not the right fit. Now, he is in a position where they could trade him and get something for him. 18 goals, that's not too shabby. So he definitely is in a position of value. And I think as we take a look at this and pull up some of the cap information, we can see that the Canes could very well have, if they put William Carrier on long-term injured reserve and he joins Jesper Fast, they could end up with around $3.5 million, just under $3.5 million in cap space. Now, if they decided to trade Jack Roslovic, of course, they move up over $6 million. Now they've got some money to play with. And I think they could very clearly shore up some of the positions. What are we thinking about, as the Canes start to head towards the trade deadline? What do you think they should be looking for?
Well, like you said, I think the 4C position is something they're going to be looking at. I think that there's always, like we talked about before, I think depth defenseman is going to be necessary. I wouldn't be surprised. I do know that Eric Tulsky said that William Carrier is not somebody you can just replace by bringing somebody in, but they might take a look at some depth forward options that could be between third line and fourth line, just in case they. And that would really depend on Carrier's situation. If they believe that Will Carrier will in fact be recovered well enough to return by the playoffs, they probably won't look at that. But if they don't, or if they're unsure, they might bring in somebody in that kind of spot too. So we'll just have to see what happens with that.
Yep, exactly what Aaron said. Depth defenseman for sure, because we saw with Ghost out that I think the talent level of what they have, and now granted, come playoffs, then you might have your black aces and stuff like that, and I'm sure plenty of Canes fans would be clamoring to see Scott Morrow given a shot in those circumstances. But even then, that's a rookie, and the types of mistakes that rookies are prone to, that's just natural. I'm not sure Brendan Moore is going to want to risk that. So bring in somebody who's a steady seventh defenseman. I know I had postulated that maybe that'd be Tony DeAngelo, but then right after our podcast came out, he went and signed with the Islanders, and that was very entertaining watching him play against the Canes. It figures that his first game in his new sweater was against the Canes, but somebody along those lines, somebody that is going to slot in there for those handful of minutes next to whoever he needs to in order to shore up the defense and make the team be able to function at a good level.
Yeah, and I think the top of the list is center ice for sure. And I want to throw a couple of names out as we start to contemplate who we might see the Canes having interest in. There are some free agents, UFAs coming up that might be of interest. Nick Bukestad, of course, with Utah. He's a guy that last year I thought the Canes would actually look at. He's big. He's 6'6". He's over 200 pounds. Last year he had over 20 goals. He had an excellent year for Arizona, the Coyotes last year. He's a guy that's on a very friendly deal, $2.1 million. So again, the kind of player that could come in with size. He can do it all. He's a guy that could actually move up in the lineup if KK or somebody else struggled. So I think that would be valuable. Another guy that's interesting is Radek Faksa. We know Faksa from his days mostly in Dallas. He's another big player, 6'3", 220. He's a guy that, he's had some good seasons, 15, 20 goals, not 20, but, higher teens. He's on a $3.25 million deal again, 31 years old. So Faksa is another guy they might want to consider depending on the type of player they want in that fourth line. The other one that I thought on the UFA side that we'll keep an eye on as days go on is Isaac Lundestrom with the Anaheim Ducks. He's just 25, so he's a young UFA. He's on a $1.5 million deal. He's a guy that a couple of years ago had 16 goals. So he's, again, he can move up the lineup a little bit. He's very defensively responsible. He kills penalties. He does all the right kind of things. So I think there are players out there, and I think as the weeks go on, we'll start to hear the rumor mill go. If the Canes decided they want somebody with term, there are some players too. Of course, they could go back to Vancouver and have conversations with Patrick Alvin and Jim Rutherford, and they had lots of those for a guy like Dakota Joshua. Now, he's a guy that last year had 18 goals. He's 6'3" and 205. He's a big player. He's on a $3.25 million deal till 28-29. So a little bit longer deal, but he's a guy that could come in and certainly give them some depth at center. The guy that I really would love to see them go after is Kevin Stenlund, who's again with Utah. Stenlund last year was the fourth line center for the Florida Panthers. This guy is an ace in the faceoff circle. He's at almost 60%. He's in the top 5, I think, in the league. So he's a right-hand shot. He brings everything you need as a center iceman to the Canes. So there are players out there. I wanted to just throw some names out to let us know that there are some players that will be available that could help the Hurricanes. And I kind of hope they go with size. I hope they go with a right shot as well. They could use another right shot centerman that's good in the face-off dot. So some of these folks kind of fit the bill, and we'll keep an eye on them. I guess the question I would ask here as we go through all this, look, at the start of the year, a lot of folks were saying, guess what? This is a transition year. So, we'll expect the Canes to make the playoffs. Some folks said they didn't think they would, but okay, that's fine. But we'll expect the Canes to make the playoffs, and they'll make a round or two, and that's wonderful. And next year they got Nikishin. They're going to have tons of room in the cap. Don't worry about it. We're coming next year. And I felt all along that Tom Dundon, the owner of the Canes, is not that kind of guy. He definitely wants to go for it. And I think this past weekend gave us the answer to the question. Are the Canes serious about going for the cup?
Definitely.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah.
I think that the addition of Rantanen says that they're not content with what they've had in the playoffs in the past, and they're ready to take that next step forward. The big question is not just getting Rantanen situated and settled into the Canes system, but will we see the Canes system open up a little bit to maximize the offense, especially of the top line and even of the top 2 lines?
Yes.
Because the defense first approach has gotten them very far. It's gotten them into the playoffs for 6 years. It's gotten them into the second round most of those times. It hasn't been able to get them further, because when it comes down to when you're finally facing one of the top, those last handful of the last man standing teams, the final 4, if you want to call it that.
Yes.
You got to have some punch in your offense. You can't be just hoping to shut them down. You have to be doing your work on the other side, and it can't be about opportunistic goals. It can't be about lucky bounces. It has to be about attack. That was the word that we used last time. You have a player now who is more than capable of leading the attack on the offense. The system is going to have to evolve a little bit to allow for that. I think it's going to be interesting to see how that happens.
I think it starts with ice time as well. Like, I'm not saying ride Rantanen into the ice, but part of the reason his nickname is Moose is not just because he's a big guy. It's because he is sturdy. He likes that ice time. He plays better when he is out there a lot and gets lots of touches, gets those good opportunities, and he will make the most of those opportunities. But if you are playing him 80% of the amount of time that he has played in the past that he's used to, you don't expect him to produce at the same rate that he has produced in the past. You need to give him that cookie. You need to give him those choice moments and really emphasize your offensive opportunities when you've got them. There have been times in games where there is an offensive zone face-off, and the 4th line is what Rod sends out there to take the face-off. What? It's in the offensive zone. It's in the offensive zone. Send out your scoring line. So
there was a game where he did that 4 times in a row after icings. He kept sending the 4th line out.
I was like, no, put Rantanen out there. Put Rantanen and Aho out there. It is an offensive zone faceoff. Put them out there. If they were just out there, then put KK's line out there. Put the scoring lines out there on those opportunities. And I'm not suggesting a big overhaul. I'm not suggesting that the Carolina Hurricanes all of a sudden try to become the Colorado Avalanche. That would be a disaster if they tried to do that. That wouldn't work. But just those little tweaks, those few extra shifts, deciding when those shifts come, maximizing those opportunities, giving the, taking the restraints off a little bit as far as the defensive zone is concerned, in order to open up the ice, open up those opportunities, will be very, very key and very important. And I would also like to say, because you mentioned the cap and re-signing Rantanen, the dollar signs is not going to be what prevents Rantanen from signing. They will offer him something that he will be more than willing to accept. I think the key for Rantanen re-signing is going to be whether or not he feels like his game is a good fit in the Carolina Hurricanes system. If he feels like he's being stifled, that he doesn't have the opportunities that he wants, it's not going to matter that Aho's his buddy. He's going to go find a team that's willing to give him that ice time and those opportunities and pursue a championship. He's not going to go sign with Buffalo or San Jose, or even someone said he was going to revenge sign with Chicago to play with Connor Bedard because of what the Avs did to him. No, he's not going to do that because they're not in a cup window. But he'll go find somebody else who is in a cup window who's willing to give him the type of game and ice time he wants. And he can find that in Carolina. He can. They just need to tweak things a touch in order to complement his particular game.
Well,
sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I was going to say one of the things that might help with that is that they are now going to have a true 4th line. They're going to be building one. They're going to build one for the playoffs. And up until now, as we know, Rod Brindamore has been very solid about balancing the 4 lines, balancing their ice time, balancing, as much as he can. Aho's line does get the most ice time, but only by a little bit. Stahl's line usually has the second most ice time, And then with both Kotkaniemi and Drury, if you look at the ice time of the centers as a sort of shortcut of how much ice time they're getting, they've been about a minute apart in ice time, So what you can't do with someone like Rantanen on the team is do that. You have to have a 4th line that comes out there and plays their 8 or 9 minutes, and that's good because those minutes have to go to Aho's line with Rantanen on it. They have to. That's where those minutes come from because there's only so many minutes on the ice in a 60-minute game for each line to play. You're not going to take ice time away from Jordan Stahl because he's doing what, is one of the most important jobs on the team when it comes to shutting down the other team's top line. So that ice time has to come from the 4th line. And it goes back to what Tom was just saying about adding a true 4th line center, one of these big, burly guys that you're not looking to drive offense, but you're looking to, be that tire out the other team for a little while, give everybody on your team a breather. You get that going, and then there's no issue. Then there's plenty of ice time for the Rantanen and Aho combination to get out there and do some damage.
Yeah, a couple things. First of all, we know that the style of play is materially different than the Avalanche. We also know that he played with 2 of the best players in the game regularly in Cale Makar and Nathan McKinnon. So to have an expectation that he's going to come in and do the same as he did with the Canes is probably unrealistic. Now, having said all that, I think the Canes are going to look at this with a little bit of a different eye, certainly Rod Brindamore, because he is one of the best players in the game. And he has not had that before. So he's relied on, Sebastian, and he's relied on a kind of a committee the rest of the way. But he's finally got someone that's a true superstar. And, I'm sure that he's going to have some discussions with, the powers that be to say they're going to be encouraging, use this guy because we want to keep him. He's one of the great players in the game and take advantage of him, And if he's going to get paid 13, 14, whatever numbers of millions next year, he's got to deliver a big amount to the team. So give him the opportunity to do that. And the other thing I'll just say is that in the short time we saw the power play the other night, I was really excited about some of the chemistry that was forming with he and Shane Gostisbehere. You remember Shane, of course, had really done a lot of that with Marty Necas. He was really one of the key guys to get that puck to him for those big shots. I saw him doing the same kind of thing quite nicely with Mikko in just the first game. They don't even know each other. So I've got a feeling that this is going to be huge, and it actually plays into one of the key discussions that I think we want to be thinking about. What do the Canes have to do to be in a position to go all the way? Okay, what has to happen? What do they have to improve? And one of the big things is the power play.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Especially in the playoffs.
Absolutely.
So if you think about where the Canes are right now, and we know they're going to be bolstering the team a little bit, how do we feel about the Canes going into the playoffs? How do we feel about their chances of winning the Stanley Cup as we sit here today?
They were already one of Muddy Puck's top forecasted teams before the Rantanen trade. We were just a little bit below, I think, Vegas and, if my memory serves, maybe Florida in terms of their odds. So I'd love to see, I haven't been able to get back out there, but I'd love to see where they've got them ranked now, because this is huge. This is a big game changer, I think that at the very least, my expectation now is that they need to make the Eastern Conference final and they need to win games. Yes. I would love to see them make it to the Stanley Cup final. I think that's doable. I don't think that's impossible at this point.
Sure.
But I want to see them, at the very least, they have to break that curse of not being able to win games in the Eastern Conference final. That's the minimum at this point. What do you think, Katie?
Yeah, I agree. I think they can go real far. Again, part of it just depends on how everything gels together and the kind of identity that they play with. They're definitely, I think they took that loss to Florida a couple years ago to heart with the physicality of in the Eastern Conference final, and that's part of why they're adding bigger bodies that are harder to push around and get off the puck. And if they can take those players and apply that identity, and if they can find that chemistry on that top line between Aho and Rantanen and Winger, wow. I mean, that you can't help but be excited. I think that Freddie and Kochekov will be a solid duo in net. They don't have to be spectacular. I don't think anyone is expecting them to come in and be Shesterkin, but if they face a Shesterkin, Bobrovsky, etc. in the playoffs, they need to be able to at least hold the fort well enough to let the scoring group get their opportunities and do their thing and not have to play from behind. And I think they're perfectly capable of doing that. So I'm excited to see what happens. A lot of pieces have to kind of fall into place, but they don't have to, wow, if we get lucky, fall into place. It's a really good likelihood that they will, provided good usage and good planning and good coaching.
Well, everybody's staying healthy too and all those things, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, the team as it was built this year, again, because of the cap challenges that Eric faced, they have, they've done well. I mean, the rest of the league has not been nearly as dominant as it has in recent years. So that's been good for them. And even though they had an extended period of 500 hockey, 25 games or so, they're still sitting in a very strong position. And I think that's again, the coaching that Brendan Moore does, the basic, assets that he has, the guys like Slavin and of course, Aho and others. He's got some players that he can really build around. And I really like your comment about goaltending, Katie, because that's something that ultimately, if we have a healthy Freddie Anderson, and Piotr has looked good his last 3 or 4 games, and I think having Freddie there is a great kind of a incentive for Piotr. And he's, if he gets into one of those periods where he can play like he can, and he did this last year, we're going to have goaltending that's as good as anybody. And that's going to be key, because one of the things we've seen this year, which is kind of unusual, is the number of odd man breaks. The Canes have given up a lot. And the other thing they have to do, we've talked about this repeatedly, they got to start the game on time. we've seen so much of this getting behind in the first period, and then it's they one of the best teams in the league, I guess, at come from behind victories. But again, they've got to start to they got to get that going again. They've got to start getting to their game more frequently, and I think that's been an interesting question. Why not? And they've got to fix that for sure if they're going to go deep in the playoffs. But anyway, lots to think about. Any closing remarks? Aaron, what do you got for us?
Well, I think that this is, one of those things where you look at all of this shaking out over, Friday and Friday evening, and you realize that we are in the Eric Tulsky Hurricanes era now. This is Eric Tulsky in charge in the driver's seat. This is his first major trade. He made this bold move. It showcases his intelligence. And also the fact that, he didn't lose any prospects in this trade. Think about that for a second. No prospects were moved in this trade. And beyond that, he ended up with slightly more cap space than when they started this trade because of how they did the Hall salary retention. I mean, the Rantanen salary retention and taking on Hall salary in full. They ended up with more cap space than they had when they started. How do you do that? Well, I mean, this is a man who his world, includes things like, Dungeons and Dragons and six-sided dice. He knows what he's doing. He knows what he's doing, and he does it on a level that I think we all need to kind of sit back and say, okay, this is going to be quite a ride, because even all the names that you mentioned, Tom, I wouldn't be surprised if there's somebody he pulls out of left field that we've not even thought about, but who is an absolutely perfect fit. That's the fun part. That's the exciting part, because we have no idea what he's going to do next. And that's, welcome to Eric Tulsky's Hurricanes.
Yeah. To piggyback off of the Tulsky thing, there was one of the Avalanche reports that said that when Chicago agreed to the salary retention, they didn't know whose salary they were going to be retaining. It was so played so smoothly that even Chicago had no idea that this was going to be Rantanen. And so Tulsky had this arranged ahead of time. Maybe it was going to be Pettersson. Maybe it was going to be Rantanen. Maybe it was going to be Chicago didn't even know who they were going to be retaining on. So he did a fantastic job. And then
Unreal.
I guess my own personal final thought is I'd like to highly encourage Canes fans, at least for the rest of this season, to be at least couch Colorado Avalanche fans. Go read on Martin and Jack Drury, because, I mean, they're still our homegrown guys. They still have a special skill set, and we all as fans really enjoyed their time with the team. It's not like they had signed a deal and came in for a year or two before we traded them like happened last year. These are our guys. And while the fit might not have been perfect, especially for Natchez in the system, we still want them to do well. We want them to be successful. We want them to have really great careers. And man, Natchez next to McKinnon is fun to watch. I highly recommend you guys, y'all out there in Canes land, watch some of the Avalanche games coming up, because the two of them with their speed together and the way that they process and think the game, plus if you have Makar jumping in from the backside, is special. It is, and that's just after 2 games. I can't wait to see what kind of chemistry they develop together. And not to be forgotten, Drury is providing something the Avs really, really need to, and a face-off guy and someone who can be a third line center for them. That is how he is being played and how they want to be utilizing him once they figure out who his wingers are going to be on that line. And a lot of the Avs commentators have talked about how he just has a grinder's mentality despite his size, and that he goes in, he fights for pucks, and he's good at cutting down angles, and how wonderful his defensive game is. Yeah. So, our guys, I'm always going to think of Natchez and Drury as our guys, as Canes first, Avs second, even though they're on the Avs now. So go watch them, appreciate their game and what they're doing too. And if the stars align and everything goes beautifully, here's to an Avs Canes Stanley Cup final.
Wouldn't that be fun?
That would be amazing.
Well, the interesting thing about Drury, and you mentioned this, is, Jack did a lot of the 5-on-3 defensive responsibilities. He was great in the face-off dot on a fourth line, or even when he was up in the second line. Those are things they've got to replace. And, that's going to be part of what I'm sure Eric is going to be up on the whiteboard, as he likes to do, and having option A, B, C, and D as they head towards the trade deadline.
You guys will be amused, though. One of the things a lot of the Avs commentators have talked about is how impressive Necas's work is in the defensive zone.
That's great to hear.
Against Nathan McKinnon, maybe it is. I mean,
that is great to hear.
Well, yeah.
The other thing, too, the other thing I was going to mention, though, and you said this rightfully so, not just Nathan McKinnon. There's a lot of other great players on the Avalanche team, and particularly I saw him teaming up nicely with Cale Makar. So hey, we wish Marty the best, and he's certainly been a great Cane and so much fun. And one of the things that we saw instantly was that on the 3-on-3, the Canes are going to have to do some juggling because of course he and Sebastian Aho were among the best combinations in the circuit. So that's something we're going to have to wait and see how that plays out because obviously whoever goes in there is not going to be the same kind of player that Marty was. So anyway, things are going to change. Change is good. And in this particular case, I think change is going to be fantastic. So lots to look forward to. We've got lots coming up. We're going to be having some fun when the Four Nations tournament comes up. Of course, we now have 3 players, so we've gone up 50% in representation with the Canes now that Mikko's on board. Cool. And during that period, we're going to have a nice round table, and we'll talk about a lot of different things, and we'll certainly reach out to our all of our viewers and listeners for any questions that they may have that we can tackle as well, and we'll have some fun with that. But as always, ladies, it's been great to talk about this, and I can't think of anything that's more fun than talking about picking up a player like Mikko Rantanen and also, of course, Taylor Hall. So lots of excitement with the Canes. There's never a dull moment. And I'm sure that we've got lots coming up in the weeks ahead. So, again, thanks so much for joining and having some fun talking hockey. For those of you listening and watching, of course, we really appreciate that you're spending time with us. We'd really love to hear from you as well. If you have questions or comments, please leave those down below, and we'll jump on them just as quick as we can. If you like this episode, please subscribe. And if you want to be alerted of future episodes of Storm Tracker and get a chance to listen to more of these great ladies talking about the Hurricanes and sometimes the Colorado Avalanche as well, by all means, press the subscribe button and the bell, and you'll be alerted of any future episodes when they're available. As always, we thank you so much for joining us, and we'll get together real soon right here on Storm Tracker.
Thanks for listening. Be sure to like, subscribe, and tell your friends for everything with the Canes you need. Storm Tracker.